I know. This world rarely slows down long enough to hear a full story. Maybe you're just scrolling past, or maybe you only paused for a few seconds. But if you're still here, even for a moment, thank you. I wrote this not as someone seeking attention, but as someone who stayed quiet for far too long, and finally found the words. I just hope that somewhere in this story, you'll find a piece of yourself, even a small one. And if you do, maybe leave behind a quiet sign. Just a gentle tap on the like button, so I know someone's still out there, listening. The room smelled like expensive leather and polished wood, but all I could taste was ash. I sat in the third row, right behind my mother, who insisted I sit back there so you don't distract anyone. I didn't argue. I'd learned, long ago, not to. Everyone was dressed like this was a gala, not a farewell. Pearl earrings, pocket squares, whispery silks, slicked back hair like we were posing for a family portrait, not dividing the remains of a man we were all pretending to love equally. The lawyer cleared his throat. The last will and testament of Edwin Fifth Thorne, he began, opening a black folder so crisp it might have still been warm from the printer. My hands remained folded in my lap. I didn't blink. I watched my cousin Oliver lean forward, his Rolex catching the chandelier light like a smirk. To my beloved grandson, Oliver Thorne, I leave the estate, including the house, the vineyards, the cars, and all liquid holdings. There it was, no mention of me, not even a sentence that said, to my other granddaughter, nothing. Silence, complete and surgical. The room let out the collective breath of polite surprise. Oliver clapped a hand to his chest. He always said I'd carry it forward, he said too loudly. My mother twisted around slightly to give me a half-pity smile. Don't make a scene, her eyes warned, as if I ever had. I didn't speak. I didn't flinch. I just kept looking at the folder in the lawyer's hands. I wondered if he felt anything, reading a lie out loud in a room full of people pretending it was the truth. As everyone stood up to toast Oliver with faux champagne and shaky admiration, I remained seated. Still, anchored. That's when she came. Small, quiet, older than I remembered. Miss Hattie, the maid who had worked for Grandpa for nearly 30 years. She shuffled to me through the crowd, her black shoes whispering against the marble. I wasn't supposed to come in today, she murmured, pressing a pale envelope into my hand. But he made me promise. Said, if they lie, give her this. I looked at her. She didn't meet my eyes. She turned and walked away before I could say a word. The envelope trembled in my hand. It wasn't sealed with wax like the one the lawyer had opened. No monogram. No stamp. Just my name, in his handwriting. The one I hadn't seen in 3 years. Familiar as breath. My fingertips went cold. I didn't open it. Not there. Not yet. Let them toast. Let them laugh. Let them think I had nothing. They had no idea what they'd just done. They always said I was too much like him. Too curious. Too quiet. Too plain. I was 7 when I gave my grandfather a framed painting of his vineyard. Blurry green strokes, a lopsided sun, a tiny stick figure on the hill. I'd worked on it for 2 weeks. He hung it above the cellar staircase. I remember glowing with pride. 2 days later, it was gone, replaced by a framed map of Bordeaux. When I asked where it went, Mom said without looking up from her magazine, "Oh, honey, it just didn't match the decor. Don't be sensitive." By the time I turned 12, Oliver had already been gifted his first vintage to manage. I was still bringing Grandpa his tea in silence. Chamomile, no sugar. He'd ruffle my hair sometimes. Other times he'd just say, "Thank you, child," and wave me away. My mother adored appearances. I once overheard her telling Aunt Margaret at a party, "At least Oliver looks the part. My daughter? Always in the garage with that ridiculous notebook of gears and wires. She's practically allergic to pearls. That ridiculous notebook lived under my mattress for years. Pages and pages of diagrams, wine-powered irrigation systems, temperature sensors, moisture-controlled storage vats. I had ideas, big ones, but they lived in silence. Because when I spoke, I was either corrected or ignored. My father was worse. Passive, almost transparent. His signature move was a shrug. "Just let it go, sweetie," he'd say. "Don't give them a reason to push back." Push back? I didn't even breathe wrong. At family dinners, I was seated near the end, next to the help if there were guests. Oliver got to carve the roast. I got to clear the plates. I didn't mind, not really. I liked watching the kitchen staff, their rhythm, their quiet conversations. They called me Miss Tinker after I fixed the broken blender with a paperclip. They saw me. No one else did. I remember one day, I was 15, Oliver had just crashed one of Grandpa's vintage cars, dented the side, shattered the mirror. He cried, made a whole show. Grandpa waved it off. "It's just a car. He's a boy. Let him be." The week before, I'd spilled lemonade on an antique chair. Not even stained it, just splashed. Mom didn't speak to me for 3 days. Told me I'd embarrassed the family in front of real people. But I stayed. I watched. I listened. And when the praise poured over Oliver like cheap champagne, I learned how to disappear gracefully. They were building a legacy, they said. One with heritage, vision, bloodline. And I was just nearby. The first time something truly felt off was my 18th birthday. Grandpa had always sent handwritten cards. Always. Even when he traveled. Even when he was in the hospital that one winter. But that year, nothing. Not a card, not a call. When I asked Mom, she shrugged. "He's getting older. Maybe he forgot." But he didn't forget Oliver's birthday 2 weeks later. Threw him a garden party with a jazz band and imported oysters. I served drinks in a starched white shirt and said nothing. A few months later, I wrote him a letter. I remember folding it carefully. I told him about my acceptance into the agricultural engineering program. I even sketched a design for a temperature-neutral wine barrel I'd been prototyping. I left it in the outgoing mail tray by the office door, same as always. 2 weeks later, I found it in the trash. Unopened. Torn at the corner like someone had checked to make sure it wasn't important. When I asked the butler if Grandpa ever mentioned it, he paused. "The master hasn't received mail directly in years," he said quietly. "Your mother handles his correspondence." Another time, I called the house phone from campus. The line rang once, then silence. 3 days later, I got a text from my mother. "Stop trying to disturb him. He's resting." But what kind of rest lasted months? Why was he never on speaker calls anymore? Why did his signature on family documents look different? It wasn't anger I felt, not then. It was confusion. A slow, building fog, like I was forgetting something I never knew to remember. Then came the day I visited early, without calling. I still had my gate code. I arrived mid-morning, unannounced. The windows were shuttered, but I saw shadows move inside. Miss Hattie opened the door, startled. "You shouldn't be here, child," she whispered. "Why?" She hesitated, then, in a voice so faint I almost missed it. "They keep him upstairs. Say he gets upset if he sees you." "What? Why?" But she only shook her head and backed away. I walked home that day, all 5 miles. I never told anyone. The next week, I sent another letter. This one through the gardener, Julio, who still liked me. 2 days later, I received a text from Oliver. "Stop trying to manipulate him. We all see through you." That word, manipulate, shook something in me. I had never asked for money, never pushed for attention. All I'd ever wanted was to be heard. I didn't open the envelope until 2 days after the will reading. It sat on my desk under a paperweight shaped like a vineyard vine, the kind of thing Grandpa used to leave in the library. I didn't touch it at first. Just stared at my name written in his unmistakable hand. Firm, slightly leaning right, with that looping R no one else ever got quite right. When I finally did, my hands trembled. Inside was a single sheet of paper, cream parchment. Ink faded at the edges like it had been written months ago. It began simply, "If you're reading this, then they've already lied." I felt the blood drain from my face. He knew. He knew what they were going to do. The letter continued, each line like a quiet explosion in my chest. "They stopped bringing me your letters. I asked, over and over. They said you never wrote, that you didn't care. But I knew my girl wouldn't disappear. I wanted to see you. I tried. They said you were too busy. They showed me pictures of you smiling at events I knew you wouldn't be at. Photoshopped lies. I was too tired to argue. My body gave out before my will did." He was sick. He was isolated. And he had still tried to reach me. I turned the page over. There was more. "There's a safe. You'll know where? Under the floorboard of the wine cellar office. Use the key Miss Hattie has. Inside is the real will. The one I signed when I was still of sound mind. It names you." I couldn't breathe. He named me. Not Oliver. Not the golden boy. Me. There was a final line, scrawled in trembling strokes. "They took my voice. Don't let them take yours." I sat there for what felt like hours. No tears. Just clarity. The kind that doesn't come in waves, but in silence. A silence so complete, it felt like truth. That night, I didn't sleep. I waited for the sun to rise. Waited for the world to wake up. And then, I packed a small bag, wrapped the letter in linen, and drove back to the estate. Not to ask for anything, but to finish what he started. The estate looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the way the light hit the shingles. Maybe it was because, for the first time in years, I wasn't looking at it like a guest. I was looking at it like a witness. I parked near the South Drive, far from the main entrance, just like I used to when I wasn't dressed for company. The gravel crunched beneath my boots. The wind carried the scent of rosemary from the herb wall I planted when I was 13. They said it was a phase. It's still alive. When I reached the door, I didn't knock. Miss Hattie was waiting, already holding the ring of keys. "I left it exactly as he told me," she said, placing the cold iron in my palm. Her hand lingered. "You'll want gloves. There's dust." I nodded once. No fanfare, no confrontation. Not yet. As I walked through the foyer, voices drifted from the drawing room. Oliver's laugh, sharp and careless. My mother's polished accent chirping about legacy. A toast was being made to a seamless transition. I kept walking. The cellar was dim and cool. The kind of cool that wraps itself around your bones, not out of malice, but out of memory. I pulled back the rug, loosened the old floorboard by the bookshelf. The key turned easily in the hidden safe's lock. Dust spiraled into the light like smoke. Inside, sealed in wax and wrapped in thick cloth, was a leather portfolio with Grandpa's initials, and another envelope. This one said only, "Play me," a USB. Of course, I took both. Then I climbed back up. They noticed me as I reached the top of the staircase. The laughter stopped mid-note. My mother blinked. "Darling, you should have called. This isn't really a good—" "I won't stay long," I said evenly. "Just long enough to show you what he actually left behind." I walked into the center of the room and set the folder on the marble coffee table, right beside Oliver's champagne glass. Oliver stood. "What is this? Some sort of stunt?" I didn't answer. I plugged the USB into the back of the smart monitor on the wall. It flickered. Then Grandpa's face appeared. Older, tired, but sharp. The room fell still. He began speaking, not from beyond the grave, from before it. The video crackled, then cleared. Grandpa sat in his study, wrapped in his old green cardigan, the same one he used to wear when walking the vineyards in early fall. His voice was calm. Director, no music, no preamble. If this is playing, it means I was silenced. And if you're watching it, it means she wasn't. The room around me stilled. Even Oliver, who always had something to say, was silent. There will be a version of my will that names Oliver as the inheritor of this estate. That version is a forgery. Gasps. Someone dropped a glass. The true will, the one I signed in the presence of my lawyer and 2 witnesses, is dated 3 months before I fell ill. It names my granddaughter as the sole heir to my private holdings, the Thorn Innovation Lab, the Agricultural Foundation, and the land on which this house sits. My mother's face went pale. She was the only one who never asked for a thing. The only one who brought ideas, not invoices. She came to me with sketches, not speeches. And when the others smiled for the camera, she stayed to clean the equipment. He took a shaky breath. You were not chosen because of blood. You were chosen because of character. My eyes burned, but I didn't blink. To those of you who see this as betrayal, remember this. Loyalty is not owed to those who erase you. He looked directly at the camera. To my granddaughter, if they're furious, let them be. You don't need to fight. You only need to continue. The screen went black. No music, no signature, just silence. I opened the leather folder. Inside was the notarized will. Dated, signed, witnessed, stamped in legal gold. Oliver tried to speak. This is insane. Where's the family lawyer? Why wasn't this submitted? From the corner, a firm voice answered. I have been waiting for her to surface with it, said Mr. Madsen, the real lawyer. Grandpa's private one. I hadn't seen him in years. He stepped forward with a second copy of the same will. He glanced at me. I believe this is yours. I took it. The air was thick, choking. My mother clutched her scarf. You forged this. Miss Hattie stepped out from behind the stairwell. I saw him sign it. I mailed the witness confirmations myself. Aunt Margaret sat down, hard. Oliver looked like a wind-up toy that had finally run out of keys. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I was no longer waiting for a seat. I had just inherited the table. It was like watching a mirror crack. At first, no one moved. They just sat there stunned, as if silence could reverse what they'd just seen. Then the room began to vibrate. Not from noise, but from unraveling. My mother was the first to speak. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She straightened her blouse, stood, and said in a voice colder than the marble floor. This is emotional manipulation. You always had a flair for drama. I stared at her. All I did was open what he left me. Her lip twitched. He was not himself near the end. They took advantage of his condition. Mr. Madsen cut in. That video was filmed 7 weeks before his health declined. He requested it be sealed. There's a signed affidavit. She looked at him like he'd betrayed her. Then Oliver snapped. This is bulls. I spent years running this place, attending fundraisers, managing staff, holding the family together. You crashed his vintage car and blamed the groundskeeper, I said, voice level. He lunged forward. You don't deserve this. You were never involved. You were absent. Because I was made absent, I replied. Because you rerouted his calls, because my letters were intercepted, because you lied. He didn't deny it. Instead, he turned to Miss Hattie. You're a maid. Who cares what you saw? She looked at him like he was already gone. You used to cry when the dogs ignored you, she said softly. And now you bark like one. Aunt Margaret murmured. Maybe we did go too far. Oliver spun to her. Don't you dare turn on me now. Mr. Madsen took a step forward and opened a second file. In accordance with Edwin Thorne's final instructions, a forensic audit of communication and legal interference was initiated last year. The results are instructive. He handed copies to the family. Emails, deleted voicemails, forwarded bank drafts, legal delays, layer after layer of orchestrated erasure. I wasn't just neglected. I was erased, on purpose. My father, who had been silent all this time, spoke quietly. I thought we were protecting the family. I looked at him. By silencing one of your own? His eyes dropped. I didn't know how to stop it, he said. I thought it would pass. I nodded slowly. And when it didn't, you helped bury it. Then came the last blow. From the hallway, a soft voice spoke. It was Grandpa's oldest friend, Gregory, the one who taught me how to wire circuits as a child. I didn't even know he'd been invited. I was there when he signed the will. I warned him this might happen. He turned to the room. He knew she was the only one strong enough not to burn it all down, but build something new. Everyone went quiet again, and this time, it stayed that way. I walked out of the room with the will in one hand and the key to the vineyard office in the other. No one followed. Not right away. I could feel their eyes on my back, burning, calculating, unraveling. But I didn't stop. I didn't flinch. I walked through the house like a ghost, whose name had finally been spoken. The air outside was cool, quiet. The sun was just beginning to drop past the ridgeline, casting long shadows across the gravel path I used to ride my bike on as a kid. I headed for the small brick building that had been locked for years. Grandpa's private workshop, his real sanctuary, not the wine cellar, not the library. This was the place he kept his blueprints, his journals, his prototypes. It took 3 keys to get in. Inside, the light clicked on, slow and golden, and there, right on the work table, was my childhood notebook. The one I thought had been thrown out. He'd kept it, rebound it in leather. Added a label, her first invention. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just sat beside it. Back in the main house, I knew they were probably still arguing, maybe spinning new stories, maybe calling new lawyers. But it didn't matter. They weren't mine to fix. I thought about confronting them one last time. A speech, a line in the sand. But the truth was, I didn't need it. I didn't need apologies covered in politeness. I didn't need performances masquerading as closure. What I needed was this: quiet, clarity, a choice. So when my mother eventually came out, face painted in some rehearsed sorrow, I met her halfway down the path. She opened her mouth, but I stopped her with a single sentence. I don't need to be loved anymore. I need to be real. Her expression flickered. Not hurt, not regret, just lost. I walked past her. She didn't follow. Back in the workshop, I locked the door gently behind me. No bang, no slam, just a click. Like the final note of a song I didn't know I'd been humming my whole life. There would be no triumphant finale, no dramatic shattering, just silence, the kind that clears the air. And for the first time in my life, it felt like mine. 3 months later, the estate was quieter than it had ever been. No more catered events, no more clinking glasses or fake speeches in the drawing room. The marble floors echoed with footsteps that weren't trying to impress anyone. I converted the southern wing into something new. Not a showroom, not an office, a learning lab. We called it the Thorne Foundation for Sustainable Agriculture and Innovation. Long name, simple mission: give overlooked minds the resources they were denied. Tinkerers, quiet thinkers. Young people like me who once hid their notebooks under their beds. The first time I opened the doors, a girl about 15 stepped inside. She had paint on her jeans and a binder full of sketches that looked like mine used to. Too complex for school, too simple for industry. I asked her name. She whispered it. Then I asked what she was building. She smiled, like no one had ever asked her that before. That became the rhythm of my days. Mornings spent walking the fields, just as Grandpa used to, but with calloused hands and boots that belonged to me. Afternoons reviewing grant proposals. Evenings in the workshop, surrounded by old notebooks and new voices. The painting I made when I was 7, the one that didn't match the decor, I found it in a storage closet, bent, dusty, forgotten. I reframed it, hung it right in the lobby. Underneath it, a brass plate. Everything starts as a sketch. I didn't tell anyone who painted it. It didn't matter. What mattered was that it lived again. That I did. Grandpa's journals were full of things he never shared. Designs for solar irrigation, notes on soil recovery, even letters to me he'd never mailed. In the margins, he had scribbled thoughts, ideas, hopes, and once, just once, I found a line underlined twice. We don't build legacies by preserving the past. We build them by preparing the next. I read that line every night for a week. And one morning, when the fog rolled off the hills and the vineyard leaves rustled in the wind, I stood outside and whispered back, I know. I'm doing it now. The vineyard woke slowly that morning. Dew still clung to the tips of every leaf, the vines casting long shadows across the gravel path, as if they too were stretching from a long, silent slumber. The sky wasn't spectacular. No pink clouds, no golden burst, just soft blue and quiet light. I stood on the balcony outside the old workshop, my new office now. A warm mug in my hands, the kind Grandpa used. Clay, slightly chipped. Below, the students were starting to gather. Some with soil under their nails, others with laptops and wild-eyed ambition. Each of them carrying something they hadn't been allowed to show before. Miss Hattie still visits on Fridays, brings lemon cake and tiny stories. She says the house feels different now. I tell her, it's not the house, it's the people we let walk back in. Oliver sent a letter once, handwritten, ironically, said he wanted to talk. I never responded. Some stories don't need a sequel, just closure. My mother hasn't come back since that day. She sent flowers on my birthday, lilies, no card. They sat in the entryway for a week before I dried them and tucked them into the back pages of my notebook. I don't hate her. I just don't carry her anymore. The quote above the new entrance is one Grandpa once etched into the frame of his tool bench. I didn't understand it back then. I do now. Some relationships are roots, others are weights. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of rosemary and the faint promise of summer. A girl from the lab calls out, waving a prototype drone that disperses water vapor evenly over seedlings. I wave back. Not the way I used to, timid, careful, unsure, but as someone seen, as someone here. This story didn't end in applause or vengeance. It ended in soil, in breath, in the steady hum of life being built from silence. He didn't leave me a crown. He left me a key, and a quiet place to unlock what had always been mine. Not inheritance, not revenge, but the beginning of everything I'd become.